start by introducing myself. My name is Luca Unsal. I am half Austrian, half Turkish, and I'm a car design student. I'm about to graduate in 1 month, so hopefully I'll be a car designer soon. I'm also a Turkish karting champion. I have some history in racing, and I am a classic Turkish car club member, and I'm on the youth board. So I try to spread the passion amongst my peers, people my same age. And this presentation is mostly going to be about how classic cars influenced me to choosing my profession, which is car design, and also how I try to spread the passion amongst my friends groups and young people in general. So my love for my classics led me to become a car designer, as I said before. I think it's quite obvious from the pictures you can see. I was involved in this from quite a young age. I don't really remember my first contact with classic cars. Ever since I remember myself, I was around them. I've never owned a car that's younger than me, and I drive mostly classics. Most of what I do and most of what I drive are vintage classics. Now, going on to community. So, as I mentioned before, I'm a part of the Turkish Classic Car Club, and they organize regular regularity rallies, and I try to take part in as much as I can, but due to studying abroad, obviously I can't compete in all of them. We try to always get new young members into our club. We're about 10 people strong right now and growing steadily. Besides the club, I also have another group of friends who are not involved in any clubs, but we organize events among ourselves, and we chat about cars, spread the passion, spread the history, spread knowledge. This is a picture of one of those. You can see a group of young timers, affordable classics, if you will, and I'll tell you, none of these owners are above 25 years old. They're all under. So I'm trying to spread my passion, and I think I'm successful in some ways in influencing my friends. So, as you can imagine, being around cars like these since I was very small, I never liked modern cars because they never had the appeal to me. So when I choose car design as a profession, I always had in mind that I wanted to have an effect on the car industry. Like Hiroma had a nice presentation with lots of important names. You'll hear some amongst my presentation as well that had a great impact, like Bertone, like Marcello Gandini, like Giorgetto Giugiaro. And I'd like to show you a bit of my work. I know resto modding was a topic of conversation prior. I'm currently working on 2 resto mod projects. However, I sadly can't share them with you due to confidentiality reasons. I'm going to share with you a project I did in collaboration with Hispano Suiza, which, as you all know, is quite a historical brand. So Hispano Suiza is a brand of the 20s, early 10s. They made incredible cars at the time, but haven't really produced anything in almost 100 years. So they wanted a relaunch of the brand, and this is the concept I had come up with at the time. So going past this, I'll move into my presentation. So why do modern cars look so dull? So 2 examples here. The screen's a bit crooked, so you can't see it perfectly, but this is, on the left you have a picture of a traffic jam from the late 60s, and on the right from the late 2010s. So you have about a 50-year gap and the evolution of the automobile. As you can see on the left, you have vivid colors and different shapes. You have, I don't know, four trucks, all of which are different shapes and different colors almost. You have a variety of things. You have a little Mini Cooper in front, which is a club one with wood paneling on the side. You don't see stuff like that anymore on the street. What you see is mostly hatchbacks or SUVs, but they're all pretty much the same size. I studied car design for 3 years now, and I couldn't tell you, most of what those cars on the right are. And some time along the way, car companies decided to paint their cars like manufacturers paint their kitchen appliances. You can get any car in white, black, grey, or silver. But if you want a color, it's very rare nowadays. So I'm going to talk about why this change happened, and a bit about what I think the future of car design is going to be. So let's start with regulations, the nemesis of a car designer. So I'll give a prime example. Impact bumpers, I think we've all heard of them. They were a regulation, one of the first ones to affect, obviously, classic cars due to the year. They were a regulation primarily in the US initially, of bumpers that could absorb a low impact, 5 miles an hour generally. However, the initiative was to reduce cost in minor accidents, but what ended up happening is they made lots of beautiful cars ugly overnight. We'll give an example to this. Quite famously, Porsche 911. It didn't change for 3 decades almost. So if you look at the silhouette, on top we have a car from 73, 83, and 93 progressively. And you can see the silhouette is pretty much the same. I mean, most parts are interchangeable throughout all of them. Just shows you how similar of a car they were. Now, the initial one is right before this impact bumper regulation. The second one is a bit after. And you can see that they've added sort of weird plastic bits to the bumper. Now, in my opinion, they've aged well and come into their own with time. However, purely from a design perspective, I think they take away quite a bit. Now, the job of a car designer isn't just to draw a nice sketch and be done with it and tell the engineer to build it. No, a car designer has to think about packaging. A car designer has to think about dynamics of the car, aerodynamics of the car, and packaging for interiors and exteriors, ergonomy as well in some ways. So what we do is we work around regulations all the time. We come up with a proposal, and someone gets back to us saying, you know, the feasibility of this might not be easy. You need to improve, you need to change, you need to adapt. So here's a prime example of this. The last generation of 911, you can see on this page, is a 964, and it has similar bumpers in effect to what the car in the center has. However, you can see that designers caught up to this problem, and they found a solution to make an elegant body again. So I'd like to give some examples from the past of the execution of concept cars. So here we have a DS Citroën designed by Flaminio Bertoni, very great designer. On the left you can see a picture from the 1963 Geneva Auto Show, and quite interestingly this car is actually located in Turin. I've been able to see it. It looks like a rocket, and that's intentionally. They've covered the wheels and they've made it have a flat belly of sorts. So in the end, when people first saw it, they didn't know what to make of it. Was it a rocket? Was it a plane? But then you look at the production version, and it just has 4 wheels on it. It's exactly the same in every other aspect. Just goes you to show that, you know, at the time you could have a design producible quite easily. This was obviously before most regulations. Another favorite of mine, the C2 Corvette. Now this is again quite similar to the prototype. Obviously I chose a coupe to represent below and a convertible up top. This was designed by Pete Brock, very influential person also later in his career. Designed the Daytona coupe for Shelby. And you can see, again, you have a concept which is crazy in some ways, which is very influential. If you saw this at the time it was new, you would, as a child, maybe you would have been fascinated by it. But then the counterpart they produced and you could buy was very similar to it. This presentation is mostly going to be about how that sort of, the gap between a concept car and a production car slowly started opening, and, well, you'll see where we get. Another example, 2416, beautiful car. Aldo Grovarone passed away recently. Great designer. And he has the concept below, which is the 365P. Interestingly enough, you can't see it from the exterior, but it's a 3-seater. So you have a central driving position. I'm guessing Italians aimed it so you can have a holiday with your wife and your mistress. I'm not sure. They decided to ditch it eventually, but it was a 3-seater 30 years before the McLaren F1, so very innovative at its time. And you can see the resemblance is very similar to the production version. So going a bit more crazy, we have a car by Gandini. Hiromu stated that Gandini was a hero of his, so he's also one of mine. I think every car designer aspires to be like Gandini, and you can see his concept, the Marzal, which eventually became the Espada. Well, initially he designed it for Jaguar, but they didn't produce it with similar shape. The interesting thing about this car is it had gullwing doors and glass everywhere, so they wanted to have a greenhouse which would because it's a rather sporty car with a V12. They didn't want the rear seats to be cramped or dark because it didn't get enough light. So the concept was to get as much light into the car as possible. So the interior of this car is normal leather. However, it's painted to look like chrome. So a very interesting concept. And as you can see, it's been watered down to production. However, you can still clearly see the lines have not changed. Now, talking of Gandini, we can't skip over the Countach, probably the most influential car of the recent automotive history in terms of exterior design. It was a packaging miracle or marvel. Well, it never really worked correctly, but to have that small of a car with a V12, amazing. And you can see again my point. The concept is very, very similar to the production one. Obviously, they've added some fins to get some air into the engine, but that's just out of practicality. The rest is, the beauty is the same, and it's minimal. It's not overcomplicated like modern cars are. Now let's move on to the modern era. Now there are lots of regulations. If I get into them, you wouldn't be able to go home tonight. It's a long list of like a horror show script in a way for me. You can see the GTR concept from the early 2000s and then this production model. Now, I'd like to take your attention to the roofline, for example. Very bubbly, you could say reminiscent of the 60s. Interesting front treatment. These are all design features that have gone lost in the production process and the process of getting a car ready to be mass-produced. And I mentioned initially regulations were a problem. However, in modern times, it is very difficult for a company to even imagine losing money on a car. So you also have a group of engineers who, behind your back, work to get a car produced as cheap as possible. So in some other examples you'll probably see, but this is another Japanese car. Similarly has a similar problem. You can see the resemblance. Obviously, it's been inspired by the car on top. However, it's lost its finesse. It's lost its appeal. Now, going back to what I showed you before with the DS, with the Dino, with the Gandini Lambos, you got what you saw in the concept form. You got a variation of it which worked slightly better than the concept. However, it was pretty much what you saw, pretty much what you desired. Now, people look up to concept cars because they're the most innovative. However, the production versions, when they don't live up to their potential, they get criticized quite a bit. So it's very difficult to be a car designer in modern times. I'll give you another example of, this is probably the most visual one. This is the 3-liter SL Homage, CS Homage, by BMW. It was a concept, and it eventually evolved into the BMW 4 Series. Now, I like the BMW's 4 Series. I think it's a decent, beautiful coupe of modern times. However, you can all agree with me, it's lost quite a bit being turned into a production model. So, you can see that, regulations are minimizing the stuff a car designer can do, an exterior car designer can do on a car. So it's always getting more and more difficult to get the next Gandini, the next Giugiaro, who can innovate, who can change everything, because the power of creating a car has been slowly taken away and is still being taken away from a car designer. So, are modern car concepts destined to underachieve? Now, this is a very sensitive topic, and I don't think so, because there are lots of examples, especially recently, that prove what I've just said wrong. First example, the Porsche Taycan. So the Porsche Taycan was originally a concept called the Mission E. The Mission E concept, as you can see below, looks very similar to what the Taycan was. Now, I believe this is because the architecture is electric. You'll see another example of this in an electric car. I think you saw it in Hiromu's presentation. He had skateboard platforms from Tesla, which is what you hear. It's a skateboard between the axles, and it houses most of the mechanical components, which means, first of all, the center of gravity is very low, but the rest of the car can be as low and sleek as possible. So a concept like this can become a real production car without much modifications. Same example with the e-tron. First time I saw this car in a motor show, I thought it was a really cool, very beautiful car. And then I saw it on the street, and I was like, wait, did they paint the concept, or is this actually how they produced it? I think looking at the examples I gave before, you can look objectively at this and say it's a good execution of what they imagined as the concept. So yeah, let's hope that car design goes in this direction. I'll certainly do my best to realize my concept as close to what it was as possible. And before I leave you, I'd like to show you, a view into the future, possibly by companies that push the barriers and possibly the future of mobility. Now, this car is a concept by BMW. It's called the Next 100. It was a vision they released for their 100th anniversary as BMW, and they wanted this to resemble, to represent what they wanted to achieve in the next 100 years. So the eagle-eyed viewer amongst you might have said, well, yeah, cool car, but they forgot to cut the holes for the wheels. How is this going to turn? Well, a quick animation here, if it works. Oh. No. Sorry. Well, we have some technical difficulties. So what this is supposed to do is, if you can see, there's a parametric mesh on the fender, which is connected to the wheel on the inside. So the car expands its fenders as the wheel is turned. So it's pretty much a shape-shifting car, and that's what I think mobility is heading to. Because if you look at cars from the 20s, you have air-fuel ratio adjustments on the steering wheel. It's very engaging. You have to fine-tune everything to what you're able to tune. And then you look at cars of the 60s, maybe 70s, you see automatic transmissions are quite common, so the engagement gets less and less. Now we see autonomous cars, we see Teslas driving themselves. Even if you buy a normal luxury sedan, most of the time they can drive in adaptive cruise control with lane assist on the highways without you having to touch anything. So the future is probably going to be that we're going to lose our engagement with cars, and sadly they're going to drive themselves. But it's good for the car because it's a new change. We're going to have new shapes on the streets that hopefully no one has seen before, and it's going to be engaging and inspiring for kids around to see these exciting new shapes. Another example is from Renault. This is also a shape-shifting car. I believe the animation won't work for this as well. However, this car, it has two modes. In autonomous mode, it extends itself. So I don't remember the exact dimensions, but by quite a bit. And also the interior space expands. You can see on the rear, behind the spoiler, all of that section moves outwards. I wish the animation would have worked. And in this process of switching your car from a self-driving mode to a autonomous mode, you change the interior experience as well. The driver's seat and the passenger seat turn around to give you a lounge experience on the inside. I believe that's the future of mobility. The interiors are going to get similar to what our living rooms are, and the exteriors are going to purely be designed around space and aerodynamics. Well, this is my view anyways. We'll see when time comes. Thanks for your attention. Hope you enjoyed.